So a very warm welcome to tonight's book review. This is the Inspire Book Club. Yeah, and just acknowledging there are so many books and so little time. I was actually just thinking that we have indeed taken quite some time on this book. Okay, we are still on. No, we are a little bit behind schedule, but I think we can be able to catch up over the next 3 weeks. So the Inspire Book Club, we are friends who have come together to learn from each other, sharpen each other, spur each other on towards the best version of ourselves. And this remains to be our mission, that if you hang around this gang for some time, then you should become the best version of yourself that is possible. As a matter of fact, one of the chapters that we are yet to cover, I think he talks about, that's James Clear, talks about the power of accountability partners. So that is what this book club has been. And we do one book at a time. Currently, The Atomic Habits by James Clear. We have a WhatsApp group. We meet for only 30 minutes. Again, one of the chapters we'll be looking at in subsequent forums or in subsequent reviews talks about keep walking, like walk slowly, but never backward. So, and that's the idea of doing what we call small, consistent habits. And we encourage buying and reading of the book, another way of putting that is that we discourage plagiarism. We believe in supporting the authors and their estates where they have departed. Then we uphold respect for all. We aspire to maintain a safe space, and it's non-political and not for self-promotion. Although eventually we created another WhatsApp group for self-promotion, that's for business, but it's not as active as this, which I think is still okay, because then we get to maintain the reason why we started this in the first place, which is to become the best version of ourselves that is possible. I like this slide because it reminds us at a glance what we are, or what the book is about. And the book, that is Atomic Habits by James Clear, is all about, number one, creating good habits. And if you were to flip that coin, then breaking bad ones. And creating a good habit, like this is the science behind habit creation, is number one, cue. And for cue, then what you would want to do is to make it obvious. Number two, craving. And for that, what you would want to do is to make it attractive. Number three, response. And what you would want to do there is to make it easy. Number four is reward. And what you'd want to do there is to make it satisfying. The inverse is true. In breaking a bad habit, then make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, make it unsatisfying. So that's like an overview. And it helps to put each of our sessions in context. So for example, this should have come later. So I could actually skip that and say, so for example, today we are looking at chapter 10 and saying how to find and fix the causes of your bad habits. All right, so if you're finding and fixing the causes of your bad habits, then you're thinking still through that framework of cue, craving, all right? So you're saying that, so we actually at this point, we are at the point of craving, and you're saying that if you can identify the cue, and today's session is actually about association, that if you can identify the cue, then you can also be able to develop a different craving, because craving is about feelings, is about emotions. And as we will see shortly, it's never about the action, it's about the feeling that the action produces. So in finding and fixing the causes of your bad habits, then you have to be able to see what is the feeling that you are going after. So James Clear starts by saying that every behavior has a surface level craving and a deeper underlying motive, that a craving is just a specific manifestation of a deeper underlying motive. For example, a smoker is not so much interested in the cigarette. They are interested in reducing anxiety, or they could be going for social acceptance or approval, or it could be a status symbol, all right? So it's not about the cigarette, it's about reducing anxiety or approval or status. And saying that, and he says that for any product, any habit forming product, it does not necessarily create a new motivation. Instead, it latches onto an underlying motive, that the underlying motive behind human behavior remains the same across generations. If you think about it, then humans have been motivated by the same things. It is said that the things that really do motivate behavior will be, number one, the pursuit of pleasure. Number two, the avoidance of pain. So in different generations, that motivation may be different. Of course, there's a lot of of course, things have developed, or you could say philosophy has developed, and we look at deeper things such as what you call the hierarchy of needs. But at the bottom line, or at the foundation, you'll still have the pursuit of pleasure, and pleasure in this case meaning feel good, all right? Satisfaction, fulfillment. That's what we mean by pleasure, not pleasure necessarily in terms of, say, like sensual indulgence. By pleasure, in this case, we're meaning feel good, fulfillment, so that even when now, for example, you talk about things such as purpose and the fulfillment that comes in pursuit of purpose, for example, then that fulfillment in itself, is a feel good, all right? Is a feel good emotion. So the things that will motivate human beings will be the pursuit of pleasure, that's a good feel, or a good feel emotion, and the avoidance of pain. That is, you want to feel good, you don't want to feel bad. That very basic definition, I think at its root is trying to point to a self-aware individual. It is part of what you would call emotional intelligence. In other words, I am able to think about my feelings, and not just my feelings, but the thing that motivates those particular feelings. So he gives a number of examples in the book, and I think probably don't have to go through each and every one of them since the point has been made. Then he goes on to say that your current habits are not necessarily the best way to solve the problems you face. They are just the methods that you learned to use. And he gives the example of one person who might learn to reduce stress by smoking a cigarette, and another person who learns to ease the anxiety, essentially the same thing, reduce stress by going for a run. And the idea is that you want to recognize the pattern in your behavior and say, this is the craving, like this is the desire that I'm having, but what is driving that craving is the cue. So being able to identify that, and you will realize that it will usually be based on past experience. So you have an event. So an event is neutral in itself. That's debatable because the event could be dramatic, but let's say largely the event will be neutral. The event is the cue, right? So the event would be, for example, you looking at if you use the same example of a cigarette, or maybe you can use a different example, like you passing by a fast food restaurant and the smell of either, let's say, fries or chicken hitting your nostrils. Okay, that's the event. And James Clear postulates that event in and of itself is is neutral. It appears that the example we have used for chips is very real for one of us. So he postulates that that event in itself is neutral, that it is the cue, but it's neutral in that for one person, it could trigger, say, a desire to have the chicken. But for another person, that very smell could, for example, be nauseating. And I think that goes for cigarettes. But whatever type of food you think about, even if, for example, it's that chicken, say, for example, for an expectant mother, it might be nauseating. So that's why he's saying that the event in itself is neutral. It is what happens, the cue. The cue is neutral. It is what follows. The craving is what varies. But then it varies depending on the experience that you have had in the past. Personally, I remember, for whatever reason, I took peanut butter when I was young and ended up throwing up. And since then, I just came to associate peanut butter. And I know it's a delicacy for most. I just came to have a negative association with peanut butter. So the prediction, he calls it prediction, but essentially you could call that your experience, all right? That you have the events or the cue. Then how you process the cue will most probably be a result of an experience you had before. So depending on that, then it will produce a certain feeling, and that will be the craving. So he says that our behavior is heavily dependent on how we interpret the events that happen to us, not necessarily the objective reality of the events themselves. And I know at this point he's just talking at the basic level of habits, but I think that's quite a profound truth that he talks about there, because if now you were to think of deeper things, say like relationships, like job losses, even like an economic situation, for example, now that's beyond habits. I think, and the level of this book, of course, is habits and forming good habits and breaking bad ones. But I think this is a truth that we have almost accidentally stumbled on, that it is how we interpret what happens to us, not necessarily the objective reality of the thing that happens to us, that really counts. Same cue, different responses. I think I mentioned that. So a craving is the sense that something is missing. It's the desire to change your internal state. And the desire is the difference between where you are now and where you want to be in the future. For the purposes of habit formation, where you want to be in the future is to feel good, all right? So he says that it's not a potato chip or cigarette or bunch of likes that you're after. It is the feel good feeling that comes with it. And that all day long, you're making your best guess of how to act, given what you've just seen and what has worked for you in the past. In other words, there is events that are happening, all right? But you're processing them through your past experience. What is required then is a shift in perspective. And he gives a very good example of a man who was in a wheelchair. And when he was asked how he feels being confined to the wheelchair, he said that he was not confined. He said, I'm not confined to the wheelchair. I'm liberated by it. If it wasn't for my wheelchair, I would be bedbound and never able to leave my house. So that was someone that was in a wheelchair and looking at his situation differently. And we are therefore encouraged to look at whatever it is that we are going at us. For example, he says, for exercise, it can be a draining task, but you can look at it as not as a challenging task that drains energy and wears you down, but a way to develop skills and to build you up. You can look at savings not as sacrifice of what you give up, but as the freedom, financial freedom that saving is affording you in days to come. or for those of us who find themselves, this one I related to so much because contrary to popular belief, I am actually an introvert who hates the stage and who is afraid of cameras. In fact, I've been invited at times to TV station and opted severally to send other people. So anyway, why? Because I get jitters, you know. And he was saying that, look at that feeling. And I must confess it's not easy. That instead of looking at it as anxiety and letting it freak you out, you look at it as excitement. Say that adrenaline rush is actually me being excited at the opportunity of being able to present myself to the world, or the nation in this case. So he says that these little mindset shifts aren't magic, but they can help change the feelings you associate. And I think that's the key, you know, that it helps to change the feeling that you associate with a particular habit, so that instead of looking at it as something that wears you down, you actually look at it as something that builds you up. Freedom instead of sacrifice, excitement in place of anxiety. That you therefore reframe the association you have about your habits. So we have a number of key takeaways. Every behavior has surface level craving and a deeper underlying motive. Remember, it's not the cigarette. It could be status, it could be approval, it could be anxiety relief. Habit-forming products latch onto existing human motivations. They don't create new ones. Your current habits are not the best solutions. They are just the methods you learned to use. And there could be better methods. There could be better ways. Our behavior depends on how we interpret events, not just the objective reality of those events. A craving is a sense that something is missing, a desire to change your internal state. And what you really want when you binge, that's binge watch or scroll or light up, is to feel different. So thank you. That's the end of my presentation tonight. And probably before I welcome comments, I can just note that we are behind on our reading schedule. So we are going to have to accelerate so that we still finish on time. So next week, we are going to do the third law as a whole, which means that should actually be 4 chapters. No, 3 chapters. 4 chapters. Walk slowly but never backward, the law of least effort, how to stop procrastinating. Anyway, it's the third law. And the third law is make it easy. Then the other week, that's on 22nd, we'll do the 4th law, which is make it satisfying. And then on 29th, we do part 6, which is advanced tactics on how to go from being good to being truly great. And then on the 30th of April, I'll invite Monica to tell us what she wants with us. Thank you very much. And at this point, I can be able to invite comments, that is feedback on this chapter.